One of the most dominant rock and roll bands of the 70s was Led Zeppelin. A main reason was Robert Plant, whose singing style, mystical lyrics, and stage presence set a new standard for rock and roll lead singers. However, since the tragic death of drummer John Bonham in 1980, there have been questions and rumors about the future of Led Zeppelin. I traveled extensively with Led Zeppelin during the 1970s, but had not seen Robert since 1979. Now he's come out of seclusion with a new solo album, Pictures at 11. And when we got together a few weeks ago in his New York hotel room, he was ready to talk about what he's been doing the past few years, his enthusiasm about his new work, and the future of Led Zeppelin. Well, now, was it a definite decision that Zeppelin was never going to work again? There was going to be no Zeppelin.
I wondered when you were going to say that.
Pretty quick into the tape.
Yeah, it didn't wait long. Yeah, it was unanimous.
Can you elaborate a little bit on it? I mean, obviously, Bonzo
not
was
really.
such a...
There's nothing more to add, except for I think that four-piece bands have been known through history for being really tight, both music. I mean, if they ain't tight musically, it's not worth even pursuing. So obviously it was very tight musically, and friendship and kinship and all that sort of thing. It had its ups and downs, but it really was superb, you know? And when a four-piece is no longer a four-piece, what motive, if you like, what right, or what purpose would it serve to suddenly start elaborating on it, bringing in more people, changing the colour of it to suit the situation? I don't think wasn't a valid proposition in any sense at all.
So all these rumors that we heard that Alan White was joining the band or Cozy Powell was joining the band, that's all just rubbish.
Absolutely.
It was never considered.
Poppycock, as Terry Thomas would say.
Yeah, I think that probably a lot of people here may not realize, if they haven't been around the band that much or seen the band that much, just really how much of a family, you know, it really was. I mean, especially you and John started in it together. I would imagine for you it must have been harder, you know?
Well, yes. I mean, for everybody it was harder. I mean, the point is, it's clear cut. It speaks for itself. If you've got a situation that you really enjoy above and beyond any sort of byproducts, fame, fortune, all that sort of thing, if you're in a situation that is of the heart as well, then it doesn't make a great deal of sense to have to turn around and look at somebody else in the middle of a song.
What about working with Jimmy? That wasn't something that you considered to continue?
Well, I just thought that we needed space now. Time's come to spring off in different directions and see what comes of it in years to come, you know. It can only be healthy. It can only be good, because the alternative of sticking together was out of the question.
Why is there so much silence around Zeppelin and Swan Song?
How can you ask that when you've been around us that much? I know you're doing a radio program, Lisa Robinson. I know you're adjusting the mic volume depending on whether I get wound up, wrong. Yeah, there's no silence at all. It's just, that's how it is. The group's finished, and people go back there and they do what they have to do.
I don't think you've done interviews, have you, since 77?
Lisa, you're the only person in the whole world who's a female who I'll get within about 2 yards of. You know, because you're so charming.
I know,
and you wouldn't come in the jacuzzi to do the interview.
No, I certainly wouldn't. Wouldn't be broadcast quality.
I think it'd add a little bit of flavour to it, wouldn't it?
Why the solo album?
Well, I really didn't have anything else to do. I mean, I know it sounds a bit lame, but when the band obviously wasn't going to work anymore, I didn't have a great deal of choice. I had to quit altogether, or did what I did, which was to work in a little pickup blues band playing around England, having the time of my life. So we were playing a lot of small clubs, everything that anybody who's anything claims they always want to do, and it was ever so easy.
And who was in this band?
Robbie, the guitarist on the album, Robbie Blunt. And nobody else that anybody's heard of. 2 saxophones, 2 guitars, bass, drums, 3 singers, and me. And we were playing every night, playing these great clubs, really stinky clubs. And he's like an excellent guitarist, and every time I'd sort of look across and say, okay, go for it, he'd play, and he'd play really well. And after about 3 weeks, he said, you know, I really wanted to play this music. I said, yeah, I really wanted to sing it. He said, but I'm getting a little tired of it now, because we've known these numbers all our lives, you know. And we just got to the point where we thought, well, we could probably take this a little bit farther somewhere, but not with the same people as we got. So we went into a corner, and we'd known each other long enough to be at ease to sit down and write, which was one strange thing for me because I've been so used to working with Jimmy. I thought I was never, ever going to be able to feel comfortable actually writing songs for anybody else. But it was just like that. It was just instant. It was great.
I'm Lisa Robinson with Robert Plant. Robert was eager to talk about his new album, Pictures at 11. Now, who's on the album besides you and Robbie? It's Paul Martinez on bass.
Paul Martinez playing bass. What happened, we took a little house, strangely enough, in Wales, so some old habits don't die. And we were desperately needing something to give it a bit of a rocket, because Robbie and myself had got some beautiful chord sequences and patterns going, but it needed something to come along and lift it a little bit. And we were lacking a bass player who was a dynamic and also a good personality. And he said, oh, well, I know this bloke. He's a bit weird, which was wrong, because he just got a good sense of humour. So he rolled up in a battered old car with his bass guitar in his hand, no guitar case. Just had his hand round the neck of the guitar, stepped out of the car in a khaki raincoat that went to his knees, with legs about as thick as a pipe cleaner and beetle crushers on, thick crepe bottom shoes. And walked in and went, oh, all right. And he was immediately the man for the job, He looked like someone from Hiram Holiday.
Now, Cozy Powell and Phil Collins.
Well, don't forget the keyboard player, because Jez Woodruff has been... if he has one credit, initially, it was determination and grit, because he hadn't played with human beings for a long time. So Jez was great. I mean, he was like, before you talk about Cozy and Phil, that was the initial, before Cosette arrived, there was like the Robbie, Paul, myself and Jez still embellishing these different chord sequences. Just like I've Never Been Gone, the track on the second side. We were kind of into that, and that was starting to take shape before Mr. Powell walked through the door. But I mean, it was quite a lot different to how it was as soon as Cozy started playing. Because he came in and went, right, this is what you want. He said, you don't want to be all soft and stupid and laid back and all that. Give it some warmth. I said, well, I'm in a bit of a sort of personality crisis at the moment. I want to make sure that what I do isn't too akin to what I've done before. I'm desperately trying to pull straws to move over a little way, as we always did anyway in the past. I said, all right, then watch this. And he started playing, and it was great.
Do you think you were influenced, I mean, how could you not be in a way by all that wealth of Zeppelin music? I'm not saying that the riffs are similar or any of that sort of thing, but...
No, they're not similar, but I think when you consider that there's a kind of atmosphere on record, an atmosphere in the studio and an atmosphere in writing that I have played I've been a part of it, And so I guess it just kept coming out, Just the same sort of, whatever it was, the same stimuli came through on this record too.
But how did you avoid, I mean, you knew so many little tricks.
All their phone numbers have changed.
Yeah, I mean, you'd been with a band, Zeppelin was 10 years?
12 years.
12 years? Mm. And you was so sort of established, and you did change the music so much, but you knew all these little sort of nuances and tricks and things that you could do, and how could you not fall back on them when you were doing your own music?
Well, because I was obviously wearing the pants with this album.
Did that feel good?
Well, it was a hell of a responsibility, one that I'd never even felt like doing before. I'd just like to do my bit and then get out.
But your bit was rather prominent.
Yeah, but
I mean, you were the lead singer and the focal visual.
Yeah, I'm talking about actually taking something from a rehearsal situation and then steering it virtually with the aid of everybody else and them all chipping in, but virtually saying, well, I think that in the end, I take what you're saying, but I think at the same time that it ought to be like this. So in other words, I was wearing the trousers. The most important thing was really to just get it so as it was right, so as it sounded right, so as the drums were sounding right, the guitars were right, everything was like, wow. All the time I was just thinking about what I intended to hear at the end, which is, it's not very sort of clever, it's just that I'd never done it before.
Well, when you were recording with Zeppelin, if you had to make decisions about things, I mean, was it always Jimmy making the decision? Or?
Not as far as the voice went. No, I mean, it was always a collective thing. In the beginning, he obviously had all the knowledge, and his credence and his opinion was far more valid because his sight was more farther reaching, so to speak. As time went on, that obviously it became a little more shared.
Robert will talk talk about working with Jimmy Page and with Phil Collins when the inside track continues. Well, now, when you wrote songs with Jimmy, didn't you mostly, I mean, you have told me in the past that you did the lyrics, but as you would sing the lyrics, the melodies of the songs would sort of take form. I mean, was it very clear-cut that Jimmy wrote the music and you wrote the lyrics? How was this different, or was this the same?
Well, it was more or less the same, except for I probably played a bigger part in writing the music because, first and foremost, I was allowed to play the guitar.
You weren't allowed to play the guitar with Jimmy?
Oh, listen to this, Lisa. No, of course I was allowed, but I made such a noise that it was dreadful. But I guess I had some clear-cut ideas of what I wanted to do now, musically, and as they got better and they became more embellished, then I put the guitar down, and what you hear started coming through.
One of the people Robert worked with on his new album was Phil Collins of Genesis.
I called Phil up and I thought, well, again, it was quite remarkable awkward, after all those years of working with those three chappies, to turn around and start approaching people. And especially Phil, who I didn't know at all. So I called him up and he was most gracious and most kind and said, yeah, I'd love to do, whatever you like. I said, well, hang on, it might be dreadful, it could be, Sisters of Mercy or something like that. He said, I don't think it'll be dreadful, but let me hear what you've done. So I had to play the drums on the demos and sent them to him, and he said, yeah, okay, great, wonderful, I'll see you. I've only got about 3-4 days, he said. I said, we'll do it in a day. And we came and we did 6 tracks in 3 days. It was great. It was really exciting. It was great. There's so much enthusiasm boiling over from him. Guy who's plays with Genesis, got his own albums, producing everybody under the sun, and then turns up with the most remarkable personality. He'd been on the stage, in the West End in England when he was a kid. And he was it was great, really jolly chap.
Zeppelin always had this horrible reputation for being lecherous and decadent and heavy.
How on earth did that happen? It must have been people like you embellishing some kind of myth.
Not me. I mean, Zeppelin would come into town and there'd be groupies and talk of wild parties and all kinds of stuff, and I never saw it. Really, I didn't.
I think it must have been the promoter really finally getting a little more than his 2%.
Zeppelin took the rap for a lot of that whole kind of big rock band, big machine kind of, decadent situation. I mean, everybody was vicariously putting that on Zeppelin.
Yeah, I think people try to pin it on us. But when you think about it, I mean, we weren't here that much. We came and we went. It was like a quick excuse me. I don't think we lingered long enough to sort of, to get too caught up in it. You could see it trundling along behind, like some sort of cloud of dust. It was, instead of leaving the car tyres and disappearing, it was coming towards the tyres of the road,
There also, however, was a sort of majesty about it. I mean, it was a very heavy kind of thing. I don't mean heavy in a negative sense. You sold out, always, every time you came to tour here, even when people thought Zeppelin were finished, and it was a dinosaur band. Still, I mean, were you to come back in 1980 or now or whenever, it would have been the same thing, I think.
Yeah, but only because we were good. We went on stage, and as a 4-piece, as I said in the beginning, we had to back everybody's... We had to sort of put our backsides on the line and come up with the goods. That was the hard thing. Well, it wasn't the hard thing, but that was at 4 o'clock in the afternoon when you got out of bed, you knew that in 4 or 5 hours you were going to be roasted, You were going to walk up those steps and you were going to have to keep doing it. And there was the element of, can they still do it? But that was what it's all about.
Did you ever worry about whether you could or not?
Well, it's very hard to look after a voice, but it's boring to talk about it. So, I mean, it's hit and miss, really, when you sing. There are parts of live stuff that I've heard. The song remains the same when I could have done Black Dog an octave higher, but I didn't. Because I was tired. I wasn't tired, but I was shattered,
What about the...
I mean, that's neither here nor there. The point is the business on stage was done.
What about the energy? What about the enthusiasm? What about just getting up to do it?
Oh, it's lovely.
Always.
It's wonderful. Even
with all the things that you've been through.
Yeah.
Because you've had some pretty heavy things happen to you in the past 10 years.
That still doesn't take away from the enthusiasm that I got to sing. All those years ago when I was a kid, that's what I wanted to do. I didn't really know how I was going to go about it, but I knew that I was drawn to it and I should play the game. And that is not a lonely thing. It's a wondrous thing. It's a great thing to share, you know.
It was a production when Zeppelin did something. You know, it was really a corporation in a way.
But it wasn't an intentional production. It was all hit and miss for us. We used to rehearse haphazardly because rehearsing wasn't our forte. You know, that wasn't where we were at. I mean, we just wanted to get on and play. We probably did about 4 sound checks in 8 years. I mean, we weren't into that. We just wanted to get on stage and go for it, you know. So the production thing that you were aware of was just a normal run-of-the-mill rock and roll tour sketch. And that was the bit that you got caught up in because you couldn't walk up those steps. You could after we started because there had to be that hallowed gap of time while the Wah Boys took their positions and it was, ladies and gentlemen, you know. But, I mean, that was what counted. All the rest was like whatever it took to do it. And that wasn't our bag, and that wasn't... Can I use that word now? Yeah.
Well, but nonetheless, all right, there was a private plane, there was a very tight, small entourage, there was security, it was hard to get to you.
It wasn't if you wanted to be got to.
Well, just from a point of view of you just weren't that accessible as a unit, you know what I mean? You were when you got on the stage and played for thousands of people. But in terms of penetrating that inner circle, Zeppelin was, I think, probably more mysterious. Is a way of putting it. Than any, I mean, even more than the Stones, really. But
well, you lose contact of what you're doing if you ain't careful. You can have that many people with you that you don't know. I mean, there are a lot of people who know friends of mine who actually do sound and do lights and stuff. And their job once a night is to, I don't know, turn on an electric fan for the drummer or something like that. I mean, it's crazy, really, isn't it? Who wants all that? To keep it simple, keep everybody out of the way, and when you want to know, then you go for it.
When we come back, Robert will talk about his singing and whether he'll perform Stairway to Heaven again. Does it feel like all new days to you now?
Very much so. My eyes are still twinkling, although they're a little bloodshot at the moment.
They don't look bloodshot.
Come closer. There we go. Same old plan.
Where are you living now?
I'm living near London now.
You're not in the country?
Yeah, I'm in the country, but...
But it's not the farm in Wales that was so idyllic and... all that stuff that you talked about. Well, now what? Are you going to tour with these musicians? Are you waiting to see how the album is received?
No, not at all, because whatever you asked me about after the life that I've had, what do I like to do, and why do I do what I want to do? Well, I like to sing. I sing on a good day. If the wind's in the right direction, I sing well, you know.
Do you think, in fact, that you're more of a singer now? I mean, there seems to be less shrieking on the
Well
record.
done, you listened to the album. It's great. For that reason alone, yeah. Yeah, I guess that is one of the... Well, I think that the excitement in vocalising, if you can use that sort of title for it, it comes from being on the road a lot. And a lot of the albums that we did came after spells of working, touring. A lot of exchanges between myself and Jimmy with the voice and the guitar and all that sort of thing. A lot of inventiveness, despite the fact that we were playing a lot. So that as soon as you go in the studio, you just remember little things, or you'd remember little nuances and stuff like that you could you could incorporate in something like the Wanton Song or Custard Pie, or you know, on a lot of the fades on tracks with Zeppelin. But it's fresh and it's like a virgin, really. It's like that new. That I was, as I said, I was concentrating on getting the whole thing to sound how I wanted it to sound, which I think I did. And B, when it came to it, I really was singing songs and singing melodies more than... I was concentrating on melodies, I guess, because I didn't have that other woomph coming up behind me.
Does it bother you if people are interested still in Zeppelin? I mean, is it something that you feel it's part of the past, or is it something you're proud of? Or?
Well, I'm very proud, obviously. It is now part of the past. It's a part of my past and your past. We all had a great time. I mean, it sounds really lame, you know, but I mean, my main intention, obviously, is to go with this and to go with the next album. I mean, we got about five titles together for the next one.
Really?
So it's a keen working setup.
If you were going to tour, when would that be? Do you have any thoughts or plans? Or?
Well, it would be, obviously, in the future. But, I mean, how do I know? I don't know. There's got to be enough material that people are going to be able to either recognise or at least have access to. Because it's no good going on stage and playing completely unheard of things. You know, otherwise I am putting my head on the chopping block. You know, people are then going to be entitled to moan. Otherwise, the alternative is to make a couple of records, 3 records, and then just casually have a go at seeing what it's like up there again. You know, I mean, I'm not blowing my own trumpet, but I do happen to listen to the records now that I'm that much further away from it. And they were great songs. But I would have absolutely no heart in playing them with anybody else. I think there's no morals if you do that. You know, you might as well go to Vegas and do it there with a studio, with a sort of resident band. You know, that's not discrediting the people I played with, but they are not a part of it. They weren't attached to it, and they have no right to it, really. You know, when it was there, it was there.
Well, now, where do you think you fit in what's happening with music today?
At the front of the stage. I don't know, I ain't got a clue where I fit. I fit within the genre of my own, what I do. I don't fit in any sort of... Where does anybody fit? It's just you do it, don't you? You know what I mean?
You know how many people have imitated you? I mean, are you aware of all the bands that are out now that are, they've called them heavy metal or whatever it is, sort of heavy rock bands or singers that tend to sound like you a bit, who have been influenced by you? Are you aware of that at all?
Yeah, but I think they've all given up now, haven't they?
Some of them are quite successful.
They should move over to soccer. It's much better. It's great fun. Yeah, well, I believe that was about. There was a movement. There's lots of people play like Jimmy, or try. You know, there's lots of people try and do lots of things like everybody else. But, I mean, influences last for a period of time and then they move on again, you know? People move on to other influencees, if you like.
How do you feel about having been really the sort of quintessential sex symbol in rock and roll, you know, with the strutting and the tight pants and the open shirt and the long flowing hair? And
Nah, it was David Coverdale.
Who? No, it wasn't. It was you. I'm sure it was. I remember.
Oh, you got to do something in between soccer. I don't know. What can you tell me now? What can I tell you?
Well, I mean, you enjoyed it all, didn't you?
Yeah, I enjoyed singing. And what am I going to do? Stand there with a cup of coffee and a cigarette? Well, you have to, when people are playing like that around you, you have to express yourself.
Don't you think you're vain?
No, of course I'm not vain.
You always have sort of a twinkle in your eye and a little sense of humor about it, but I mean...
Well, if you can't be serious about yourself, can you? How can
there are plenty of lead singers who are quite serious about that whole image.
I had a spell for about a week and a half or something like that. And then you have to really smile at it all. Bonzo used to say to me, don't matter how you sing, just go out. He said, you know you can't sing that well from night to night, just go out and look good. So when I used to really hit some good parts in a song, I used to turn around to him and shout, how do I look? It was great. Oh dear. I don't know about being vain. There's a lot worse than me around.
The song Moonlight and Samosa, this is a particularly romantic song, yes? I mean, it's a ballad.
Yeah, it's a song concerning love. Concerning, obviously love that's kind of, to all intents and purposes, gone. But it's still there in the hearts of the two people. It's like that Leroy Van Dyke song, Walk On By, Wait On The Corner.
You know all these old songs. It's unbelievable. I mean, all these different... You still collect singles and things like that? When you're at home, you listen to them and...
Yeah.
What else do you do? What else have you been up to?
Just sport. Squash, soccer, tennis. Singing, writing, a hell of a lot. I mean, it might have taken 5 weeks to record this thing, but we were fooling around for at least 5 weeks before.
You once said something to me that when you were a little kid, you used to dream. I asked you what you dreamt, and you said you dreamt of being sort of a hero, kind of like a Davy Crockett type, just very heroic dreams. And I think some of that came out in the movie. You know, just that whole little bit.
Yeah, but it's only a spasm that you get, a phase that you go through, don't you?
How did it turn out differently, though? I mean, those dreams.
Oh, well, it hasn't turned out differently. I don't really... I think I only said that as a joke anyway.
You're going to take everything that you said now and say that it was a joke. But I mean,
I'm not...
You have a heroic sense of...
Well, I have... I do like romance. I like my romance and I like other people's romance. I think it's very warm. Initially, its emotion is so pure that it's like, it's fantastic. So if you can capture it in any way at all, you know, in song, that's really a good thing to do. Just like A Whole Lot of Love has got very little to do with that. Then maybe Moonlight and Submersive and the Rain Song and things like that. They get as close as I can get to good, honest love.
What challenges you now? I mean, what would you like to see happen next for you?
Well, it's very simple. I saw you got a program over here called Portrait of a Legend. And the other night, it was James Brown, and they asked him exactly the same question. Because, I mean, he was so dynamic, and still is very dynamic. And he said to make the next record, to hit the next stage. As soon as you shift a little bit, you've got a new theatre again. It's a new stage of operations altogether. It's, you just move over, and you go, the possibilities are different here.
You have an essentially optimistic attitude about life, don't you? I mean, you have some kind of strength somewhere. Well, not necessarily. A lot of people just can't take things that happen to them and they fall apart.
As long as I can get up and I can sing, and as long as I can add something to some combination which may or may not need me, and it may or may not flourish with my presence, then that's all I want to do, you know? I mean, things come and go, events pass, and for better or worse, I still have a hunger for the only thing I can do. I can't knock a nail into a piece of wood very successfully, you know, and my dreams of being a soccer player are fast going into injury time.
Why do you think bands like The Who and the Stones have survived?
You can only survive as long as you believe in what you're doing. And that's far more important than how many people come and see it. I mean, Stones is fantastic, really. I mean, the last studio album I thought was great, really good. And I mean, as long as it comes out that enthusiastic, whatever amount of effort it takes initially to get the ball rolling again, to make it all wind up to the degree that it kicks off, and it's actually, it's credible, then nothing else matters.
Could you see yourself doing this for another 12 years?
I could see myself doing it until I think I'm foolish.
Thank you, Robert.
Thank you, Lisa. It's been real.
We'll have a word about future shows in just a minute.